Welcome, everybody, to day 2 of RevCon. How was yesterday, y'all? What an exciting day. We heard from some spectacular speakers, and we have more to go today. I'm Jared. I'm co-founder of RevGenius and thrilled to have you for day 2. So I want to start out by giving a shout out to our wonderful sponsors. Common Room and Sigma are our diamond sponsors, and you heard from Orla and Kevin yesterday. A big thank you to our other partners, Avoma, The Juice, Hublot, EvaBot, People.ai, CloudLead, GTM Partners, Hockey Stack, our community partners, Marketing Examined, Peak Community, Marketing Ops Pros, RevOps Co-op, Revenue Reimagined, Gain, Grow, Retain. Say that 10 times fast, you can't. So we ended yesterday with RevOps. We're starting today with RevOps as well. I'm joined by 3 spectacular women who are RevOps leaders and really paving the way for RevOps. Welcome Lisa Kelly, Laura Wheeler, and Jackie Leahy. They'll be answering some of the top voted questions from the RevOps community. Let's go, ladies.
Thank you, Jared. I am going to pull up some questions. I'm glad you guys are all joining us. We received a lot of questions, and so we're going to do our best to answer as many as we can today. Let's get started. Okay. So now I'm losing my screens here. Start off with Jackie. I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hello. I'm Jackie. I'm in Boston. I started Activate the Magic, a RevOps fractional consulting company, a little bit over a year ago. I absolutely love the chaotic early stage companies under 200, and I'm just so excited to be here.
Thank you, Jackie. And Laura, you're up.
Yes, welcome everyone. So excited to be here. So I am our VP of Revenue Operations and Enablement here at Speckit. Prior roles, obviously, before that. And, tis the theme here in October. I absolutely love horror films. And so if anybody has any good recommendations, please put those in the chat for me.
All right, and I'll introduce myself. I'm a revenue operations consultant currently. I've been running global RevOps both in fractional and full-time positions for a bunch of companies over the last decade. And I'm excited to tackle the top 10 Ask Me Anything questions that we received. So we're going to start off with the one that everybody seems to ask is, what is your definition of RevOps? And Jackie, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I call it all the people, process, and technology choices that happen behind a revenue team. That's what I call it. But
all right. Love it.
Yeah. How about you?
Laura, what do you think?
Yeah, so defining RevOps is really hard. I feel like over the last 2 years, it's really evolved into more of a really integral role in a company. And so the way I like to think about it is efficiency of dollars that are flowing through an organization. And so that is from top of funnel to back funnel. But I feel like it is the definition of RevOps is to find efficiencies in the cost and burden that we are bringing in and the revenue that we have. So, but I like Jackie's better. Yes, it is people, process, that all goes into it. But at the end of the day, we need to make sure that we're efficient with the money that we're spending and the money that we're bringing in. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure your company definitely appreciates the focus on efficiency. I think it's, RevOps is one of those things that has evolved a lot. We had sales ops, marketing ops, service ops, and then now we've become revenue operations. But one of my favorite quotes from one of my favorite CROs is when you asked him, what does RevOps do? He says they keep the trains running on time. Which is a kind of a good metaphor for it. But in my opinion, I look at the responsibility of RevOps to build, optimize, and maintain the scaffolding, the underpinnings of the systems, technology, and processes that hold up the entire customer lifecycle. And I think that's an important nuance to say. It's meant to take these people from both prospect all the way through to renewal and upsells. And RevOps, owns that journey and that experience that they flow through. So, all right, we'll jump into the next question, which is what are some of the key challenges facing RevOps teams today? And I think that we've had a unique year this year. And one of the things that is, I'm sure RevOps is acutely aware of, is they usually own some of the largest expenses in the go-to-market budget, meaning the technology. So when there's some economic headwinds, they can find themselves in the hot seat. And to be ready for that, you have to make sure that you've really looked at your tech stack from top to bottom. You want to look at usage. You want to consider alternatives, including, do we need this? And then understand the consequences of making those changes. And also, do your users love the tool, hate the tool? Because if you're going to make changes, it's going to have an impact, and it can be very painful for the end users. So you want to make sure you call out the pros and cons to each of the tools in a way that your CFO or whoever's providing that pressure understands. They have to understand the impact and say, yes, we can get this out of our tech stack. However, these are the consequences. And I think that's an important thing. So the challenge is being able to articulate that in a way that an executive understands. They're not just seeing it as a nice to have instead of a need to have. So Laura, Jackie, I don't know if you have anything to add to that about the key challenges for RevOps.
Yeah. One of the challenges I'm seeing is a lot of RevOps headcount is getting either delayed or cut because of what Bessemer is calling the sassacre. And I've adopted it because I think it's brilliant. And I think you pair that with, I think your average RevOps person gets into this because we're like super curious and helpful, and we just want to make everything great for everybody. And when the tickets pile up or the requests pile up, my automatic is to go into like do mode and almost be like a reactionary, like fire putter outer department, rather than really thinking strategically and like pushing back against the checkboxes. Like it's going to take me longer to be like, no, you don't need that checkbox. Let me show you why. Versus, let me just put in the checkbox so Joey shuts up.
Okay, I love Sassacre, and I am now adopting it as well.
Yes.
All right, Laura, anything to add, or should we jump to the next question?
Let's jump to the next one.
All right. Question number 3, Jackie, this one is yours.
Yeah, so I might be totally biased because I run a fractional RevOps consultancy, but I think it's really, I don't think it's the wisest to hire RevOps until you really, really need it. So a lot of times you just need like someone who doesn't mind doing a whole lot of research and asking around, or you just need a friend, really, until you get to the point where you absolutely need someone. And if you really need a RevOps person before you're at like 5 million, you probably have things that are too complicated. So really pare it down, be like excruciatingly responsible, and like push back against automations and stuff until it's absolutely necessary, where the go-to-market fit is like whirring and buzzing, and we really do need to take away manual stuff for the ship to go. Yeah,
I think that is so key. And I know maybe something that's hidden in this question is, at some point, are you outsourcing revenue operations before you bring it in-house? And I know you probably are biased as well, but
please do.
I do agree with you. I think that there's RevOps is a strategic role, and too often I think if you do it too early, you're going to miss on the skill set that you actually need within an organization. And so it's going to be disguised as a systems admin, or revenue operations is going to be disguised as a sales ops, person. And then that starts it off on the wrong foot of calling something that's RevOps that might not be RevOps. And so I think that's actually a really great insight. And I'd love to know, Lisa, what you think about, when you start thinking about building a RevOps.
Yeah. Well, I think, to Jackie's point, I'm a little biased as well as a consultant, but I will say that in my experience, a lot of times there's the tactical and there's the strategic, and the tactical is usually what becomes very acutely painful. And then again, you hire a RevOps person that is in there to be, you know, an admin for your tools or things like that. And they don't have the strategic side of things in place, because a lot of that strategy is being handled by the C-suite or by your head of sales or your head of whatever. It's being handled at the executive level, but at some point that need for that someone to be thinking about the entire customer journey. And again, the structure of your C-suite will actually tell you this. Like if you have a very segmented, you have a head of marketing, a head of sales, and a head of services, you're going to need someone that ties those together. And that's where that strategic RevOps comes in. And when you start seeing disjointed connections between those departments, I think that is a huge indicator that you need someone thinking about the entire customer lifecycle in a true revenue operations strategic role. So I think that would be, you know, where I would take it. But Laura, I'll turn it over to you for question number 4.
Awesome. There is so much meat in this question. I just want to call it out because I could spend an entire 30 minutes on this. So I will try to be brief. But I think when you, as a revenue operations professional, and you're thinking about setting priorities, yes, this could probably be another challenge that we could have mentioned before. There's always going to be change. And so I think the key words in here are establishing a working cadence that requires buy-in and support from other teams. Because just like you said, Lisa, we are working with multiple different departments, hopefully all working towards the same goal. And so for me, what I'm trying to do is I think setting a foundational working cadence before even really establishing the goals and what you're moving towards. So if you're establishing a revenue operations organization, hopefully, and it would probably be best practice to have a working cadence. You need to define how you and your team work across your stakeholders. And so that's starting by defining how you are evangelizing revenue operations. I mean, the first question we talked about today was, what is revenue operations? It's still being defined. And I think coming into an organization and making sure that there's a clear definition of what your team does and how they interact with people, what we own, what we don't own, making sure that they understand how we all work together, and establishing that first and foremost really, really helps mitigate some of the future challenges that you might have. And some of these things that I've done in the past is I love to run this thing called working styles and understanding how my stakeholders like to be communicated with. You know, there's always the DACY model or the RACY model, whichever one you want to adopt. Of who is the actual driver? When do we collaborate as a revenue operations team? When do we just need to be informed because that just helps us be better, and then vice versa. And so establishing that working cadence, I think, first of all, will help your collaboration and buy-in. Now, when it comes to setting priorities and always shifting priorities, and to Jackie's point earlier, you know, you have this backlog of requests and it's so easy to just like do. I think when you're setting priorities, there's always going to be a top down and a bottoms up. Hopefully you understand and are listening to your stakeholders. And that could look at like an intake form that is regular check-ins. And so making sure that we are all on the same page of anything that is in our ether of requests that are coming in, that they fall into the buckets of what we are trying to establish as a company. What are we trying to drive for this quarter, this year? And mapping that up. And so I think having established priorities, how we decide priorities is really key too between stakeholders, because someone might think that their priority is better than somebody else's priority. And so helping to understand like what are those kind of big rocks that we're all going to work on together. So making sure that you have dedicated lanes. I like to use like a t-shirt sizing model. So what's the effort on it? How long is it going to take? Who needs to be involved? How long? So, and making sure that we can understand what those priorities are. And then I think the collaboration and buy-in, if you've established those first two, are, I'm not saying easy because nothing is ever easy in this world, but it will help set you up for success. So when you think about collaboration and buy-in and the multiple different stakeholders, I like to have the mantra of meeting them where they're at. So someone might like to be a contributor or informed. And what type of modality does that look like? Am I coming to your team meeting and giving you regular updates? Do you just need a Slack, or do they not live in Slack and they're still in email? And so making sure that you have full and transparent communication, because things will change. Change happens all the time. Projects might get delayed. And then having a clear definition of what your stakeholders' role is in that priority. because you need to hold them accountable just as much as they need to hold us accountable into reaching the goal. And so that's my approach in how to set up a holistic working cadence to make sure that you are getting buy-in and support from the teams and your stakeholders.
Yeah, thank you. I totally agree. I think one of the key words that really I keyed in on was transparency, because two things I've seen work really well is making sure that you have your head of RevOps as part of the executive leadership team, making sure that they are staying in line with the priorities, et cetera. And then the other part of it is keeping some sort of centralized repository of the list of things that RevOps is working on from a priority perspective, so that someone knows, like, hey, I put in this request to do this thing, and they know that it's like 5th on the list, and it's going to happen. It's just not there yet. I think sometimes that's helped with people understanding where they are in the queue, because frankly, when you get to a certain size, there's always a queue, right? There's always people lining up to ask things. And I think having some transparency, and I will say that you have to defend yourself from that at times, because they'll say, well, why isn't this is the most important thing to me? Why isn't it the most important thing to you? And you have to justify the fact that the other components that are ahead of it take priority, right? And so I think that's important. All right. Question 5, over to Jackie.
So yeah, the last question totally flows nicely into this one. Wheels, Laura had just such a mic drop response to the last question. And I think the core element of this is going to be transparency and connection, where it is like a totally accessible, open to the world, like spreadsheet or Trello board or whatever it is, letting everyone know like what priorities sit where they're headed, and really having the leadership across the board all aligned. Now definitely like debate your hearts out when it's time to really collect and prioritize for the upcoming quarter or however your cadence is. Like absolutely, like let's be ruthless in what matters and why and what the impact is. But then once we do align, it's super essential that everyone aligns to that and owns it like it's their own idea. So we do have that one united front. So we have trust and feedback and not like blamey game and like vanity metrics and then the fiefdoms, which can get out of hand real fast.
Awesome. And you actually have the next question as well, because it did flow into there.
So. Okay, ready? Anyone but the CRO. Literally anybody else. And from my personal experience and what I've seen, again, we want to be helpful right-hand gal or guy to whoever we're working with. And the CRO or VP of sales, that sales leader, is just so good at their job, their regular day job of selling and getting agreement and putting things across the line. And so they'll be doing that whether they're your actual boss or not. And so commingling that amount of just natural leverage and influence, really hedging and making sure that they're also not the one making your headcount decisions and whether or not you're going to have health insurance tomorrow. I think it's too close for comfort. And you really want to be, I look at the RevOps as sort of a chief of staff type role where you're really an advocate for the entire revenue system. And so the only case that I will say, okay, to rolling up to a CRO is as long as that CRO is like truly authentically a CRO, and not and responsible about their addiction to getting things across the line.
Yeah, I think this is probably one of the more controversial questions because everybody has a strong opinion on it. And, when I thought about the answer to this question, it depends. It depends on the structure of the company. It depends on the span of control. But I agree with you in the fact that oftentimes, regardless of reporting structure, you end up working for the CEO if you are covering the full revenue lifecycle, because they're the ones that often want to keep their finger on the tab of everything that's going on, right? They want to wake up in the morning and know what's happening in each department. And the person that owns that is often the RevOps leader. So, yeah. All right. Moving along. Question number 7.
Ooh, this one is spicy. So what should we be held accountable to? What are the top 5 metrics? So I think I want to level set before we go in here, because RevOps being held accountable could mean 2 things. One, it could mean literally our comp plan. And I'm just going to say this in the wild, I am a firm believer that everyone at a company should have a variable component. So like, I'm just, as far as like a compensation held accountable to a variable component, and what I mean is a trackable goal that is tied back to a metric or KPI. And so when we think about those in 2 different buckets, those are 2 different types of measurements. But if we are talking about just metrics, and at the end of the day, how my company can justify my spend as a revenue operations leader, or me can go to bed at night and say, I am a successful revenue operations leader, there are definitely top 5 metrics that I always try to look at. And these are lagging, and there are other things in here, but we are the driver of revenue within an organization and the efficiencies. So absolutely, to no surprise, growth and net retention, we have to make sure that we are retaining our customers and that we are growing our customers. Lisa, you talked about customer advocacy and like upsells, and that is such a big key that we need to make sure that we are efficiently growing, because that obviously has an importance to another metric of our customer acquisition cost. If we can get that down, that's amazing. I also look at new ARR, new logos coming in. And so new logo acquisition. Now that might not be something that like your company tracks, but I work for SaaS tech company. It's pretty dismal these days, but here we are tracking these. So it's net and gross retention. We're looking at new logo acquisition. Some of the more like granular ones that we can look at, maybe from a cadence of not only just being held measurable from like a quarterly perspective, but some of the more leading lagging indicators are making sure that we are looking at the average sales price of the revenue coming through per contract or deal, whatever you're tracking. What is our win rate? So how are we coming up against competition? Close rate, win rate, you can calculate it in different ways. Making sure that we are decreasing our deal cycle length. So these are all like velocity metrics, because at the end of the day, the faster that revenue goes through the funnel, the better, but we want it to be quality as well. And so, and then the last would be AE efficiency, because all of these inputs are assumptions that we make at the beginning of the year, and we're modeling revenue off of. If we are below these, our company will suffer and we'll have to make cuts somewhere else. If we're above, then it's amazing. And so we need to make sure that, did we model a good plan for revenue for the year? And those are the metrics that I would say are the most ones that I track.
Yeah, Laura, I'd say you nailed it. I think one of the important nuances, though, of this is that a lot of those metrics are really, they're more important when you have revenue enablement, because you're talking about not just the efficiency and you're talking about the how good are your salespeople, right? Or your CS. And I think that enablement component of RevOps, which I'm a firm believer that enablement should always report through RevOps. If that changes that metrics conversation a little bit, right? Because if you don't own that enablement and how well trained and how well the team is executing, then it does shift those metrics a little bit. So, all right. So we've only about 5 minutes left. So I'm going to try and rapid fire through these last couple questions. So this one's about the right level of depth of metrics. And I think, this is always one of those things we end up, what I like to call data drunk oftentimes in companies, where we're looking at so many different metrics that nobody can really make sense of it. So I don't think there's a right level unless you have a specific audience in mind. in my opinion, the right level of metrics is the level that the person can take action on. There are interesting metrics and there are actionable metrics. And so when someone says, hey, I'm curious about this number or KPI for our company, I always like to push back and ask, what action are you going to take depending on the outcome? If it's bad, are you going to do something about it? Or is this just interesting? So I think every level of leadership needs a different level and a different set of metrics. For example, if we talk about bookings, the C-suite cares about the big picture, right? They want to know how we're trending towards hitting the booking goal overall. The level below may only care about their portion of the bookings, whether that be global theater or the specific product line or whatever, however your company is segmented. And then the level below that cares about activity metrics, right? Some of the more leading indicators, which are going to be looking at like time in stage and dollars in stage. And then you have the frontline reps that they care about their personal quota, their lead flow, how they can go about looking through their territories, et cetera. So I think there's no one right level for a company. It's the right level for the leadership layer and what they truly can take action on. They can drive to those metrics. So Laura, Jackie, anything to add on that one?
Yeah, I think you absolutely crushed it. My one underline will be, unless it's at a board meeting, looking at leading indicators. It is so tempting to be like, look at our ARR. It's like, okay, but that is the result of what happened last quarter, basically.
Yeah. Yep. All right. 2 more questions.
Ooh, what portion of the funnel do you feel is the most important? I would say D, all of the above. No. But if you have to focus on something, the way I like to look at it is all of these pieces of the funnel are always changing, and you only have so much effort and energy that you can spend to optimize any piece of this, and they are all interconnected. Because if you do one thing over on, the top of funnel, so we'll kind of level set, areas of the funnel, maybe top of funnel demand gen, you've got middle funnel, your kind of sales execution, and then the pass off maybe to, CX sales support or the customer funnel. So every single one of those are going to ebb and flow, but I like to think about it as, where is the largest dollar amount of investment that we are making at this time, and how can we protect or maximize the output? So I like to think of, if we had to have an equation of where we can focus our effort, because at the end of the day, it's all about maximizing revenue within an organization. That's healthy revenue, that is efficient revenue. And so when we think about where that is, we as revenue operations leaders need to understand where's the effort and the dollars that we're putting in and making those big bets. So a case in point is, I just recently, I work at a startup, and we're trying to define a category. So a lot of our dollars is going to the top of funnel and educating our buyers and why we're doing things differently. So case in point, I really want to make sure that what the dollars that we're spending in the top of funnel, and that we are capturing that, and we have a very, very solid process that if we're getting people into the funnel, that we're maximizing how we're executing on sales in that process. And that can mean a myriad of different things. So I know it's different and it can ebb and flow, but I would love to hear, Jackie or Lisa, how do you look at the funnel, and what does that look like for you?
I think it depends, again, on the company, and to your point about where you're making the biggest investment. What are you trying to drive towards?
Yeah.
And I think that you can actually, I know I've mapped this out, right? There's a point when new logo acquisition and that new logos matter the most, right? That's your growth engine. And then after a while, you start looking at that, and you have a retention level that starts to fall off because you're so heavily focused on new logos that you're not doing what you need to do for the end of the revenue life cycle. And so you've got to be able to balance those between and recognize when your company is at that inflection point of your customers are leaving you faster than you can acquire them. And I've come across a handful of companies that are at that inflection point, and it is a pivotal time for a company. So I think it's, as far as getting right first, I think I would say it's the front, right? The marketing and the sales to get new logos in the door. So, and I I will say we have 1 minute left. So we get a 90% because we got through 9 out of the 10 questions. And I don't think we'll
Love
get
it.
the last one because it's meaty. The last one's meaty. So we'll make Laura has kindly she's taken on, we've received a ton of questions. We're going to send a document out afterwards so that you can, not after the session, but after the event, that we can answer some of the questions that we didn't hit on today. And I'll add in that last 10th question so we don't have to leave anyone hanging. So, all right. Thank you, Laura and Jackie. I'm privileged to have been on this panel with you guys. So thank you.
Same. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I think, Gina, are you going to close us out?
You know, I work in tech and I still can't figure out the platform. I was ready to do my spiel and I was muted. Thank you everybody for joining in this session with these incredible ladies. Stay tuned for a doc that will be shared with all of you post. Laura, Lisa, Jackie, thank you guys so much for taking the time to be here today. Like, amazing session. Everybody have a great day and stay tuned for our next session. This is coming up right now.
Thanks, everyone.